5:02. We're going to get started here. Welcome everyone tuning in or watching afterwards the recorded video of our super duper awesome San Antonio Startup Week event. This is our Geekdom Incubator Spotlight from Concept to Pilot. So my name's Leslie Chasnoff. I'm a program manager over at Geekdom, and I get to manage many wonderful programs at Geekdom these days. So coming at you here tonight from our civic entrepreneurship track, which is a CivTech kind of hosted event. However, one of the other awesome programs I manage at Geekdom is our Geekdom Incubator. And so I'm new to managing this program. I want to give a shout out quickly to Joyce Dooley, who's been managing this program throughout the rest of the year. So she's been working closely with all of these superstellar teams and mentors and people who have come into workshops and whatnot throughout the program. So thank you, Joyce, for all your hard work on the Geekdom Incubator program. Hopefully she'll watch this or tune in, maybe interact with us a little in the comments or give us some cool feedback afterwards. But we're here tonight to highlight these wonderful teams. So the Geekdom Incubator, we're in our first year. So these are our kind of guinea pig teams, if you will. So they're in their 9th month of the program right now. And all of these teams are working on civic innovation technologies, civic innovation companies, and they entered this program with an idea, a business concept. They may have had, some of the parts of the business worked out. They had a general MVP or, pilot kind of that they were working on for their product. But the purpose of the incubator program is to take that concept, that super early stage company, and help them work through all the pieces that are to make up like kind of a full circle of their company, right? Solidifying their business plan, solidifying what that product is that they're going to roll out, thinking about customer segments, how are they going to reach them, how are they going to market to them, how are they going to get traction, how are they going to potentially get funding, all that fun stuff that you do when you're working on your startup at an early stage. So we're really excited to bring these teams to you here today. We're going to quickly let them each give an introduction of who they are, what they're up to, and then I'll introduce our awesome guest moderator. So why don't we go ahead and start with Pawtify.
Thanks, Leslie. So Pawtify is, I started Pawtify with my co-founder, Laura Prochaska, and we started it with the intention to help adoption shelters or rescue shelters in San Antonio kind of transform their adoption process and help streamline it a little bit more. So what we're focused on, especially during the incubator program, is trying to identify ways that we can help potential adopters identify what they're looking for in a pet a little bit easier, help them categorize their needs, their wants, or what resources they might need or might already be available to them, as well as on the shelter side, helping a shelter streamline their adoption process, help them communicate better with their adopters, or just help to bring adopters into the shelters, help them identify people who they might not know already, or who might have capacity to take special needs animals in, or might have capacity to take certain breed dogs in, and that kind of thing, and helping to bridge that gap there. So that's really what we're focused on during the incubator program is we've been identifying the problems, identifying the solutions that we can implement, and working on the development of that pilot stage. And then fun fact, Laura and I met actually at CodeUp here in San Antonio a couple of years ago, and the first stage of Pawtify was an adoption notification system, kind of like a pet match system. And so that's what we built originally for our CodeUp capstone. So that was really fun. So Pawtify has been around, and Laura and I have been trying to kick it off for a couple of years, and we're really excited to be a part of the incubator program. It's definitely helped us grow a ton in these early stages in just a few months. So we're really excited.
Awesome, thanks, Emma. And another fun fact there is that the idea and kind of inspiration for the Pawtify started also from CivTech coming in and talking about some of the challenges that the city was facing. And one of the challenges was animal care services and their adoption process. So also another fun fact. Let's go to Polis.
Hi, my name is Matt Munroe. I'm the Business Development Director for Polis. Below me, on my screen at least, is Colby Doyal, who is our Marketing Director. And so Polis, we are building an interactive map app for the Riverwalk that utilizes Bluetooth low energy beacons to provide connectivity and a network at the subterranean level of the Riverwalk. This idea came also out of CivTech program. Joyce Dooley came and presented along with some city officials to an entrepreneurship class at Trinity University that Colby and I were in. And from there, that's where we kind of, the idea birthed. And then going through the incubator program now, we are starting to build a pilot and test the technology and making sure it works, and hopefully provide that navigation wayfinding for tourists and residents so that they can help like navigate and discover the Riverwalk.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Yet another CivTech touch point. And last but not least, we will have solovaGo introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Emily Rodriguez with solovaGo. My teammates are Jennifer Walker and Wayne Siddall. Just like Emma and Laura, we actually found our start at Code Up as part of our final capstone project. So there's something that a lot of us have encountered before, women especially, but not just women. We're out for a walk, or we're waiting for a friend, or walking to our car, and someone starts to follow you, someone starts to harass you, or worst of all, someone attacks you. And so at solovaGo, we're building a safety application that provides our users with tools to make informed decisions about new and familiar areas that they might want to visit in San Antonio. We're also equipping them with tools to quickly reach out to some preset contacts to let them know where they are and just how they're feeling in that moment. And so we've been working closely with the city of San Antonio, both in some of the data that we're going to be using within our application, but we've had a really great discovery process on the type of data that's beneficial to our users, and in turn, the data that our users provide that's beneficial for the city and other users.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emily. So now that we have gotten to know our teams kind of briefly and their quick little elevator pitches and inspiration and background for who they are, what they're up to, I'm going to kick the mic over to Mr. Drew Hicks. He's our guest moderator here this evening. He is the Customer Experience Officer at JobWord and the principal at Fourth, a creative agency based here in San Antonio. Drew has been a really wonderful mentor to these teams, to some of our pre-accelerator teams. He's also done some excellent workshops with these teams to kind of narrow down the experience of their product and the small, thin vertical slice is what we like to call it, that they're really working on for their pilot and early stages. So Drew, take it away.
Cool, thanks Leslie. Thanks for the kind words too. I appreciate the introduction. So all three of the companies here tonight, I've worked with and I feel like I know a little bit about, but I really want to give you a forum to just kind of talk through your experiences and how these last few months have gone. And so I think to kick things off, we talk a lot about big ideas, right? Like, oh, I've got this great idea for a thing. Jumping off and deciding to build that is really scary. So I'm curious for each of you, how did you know that the problem that you settled on was the right problem to go solve? And I guess I'll kick it to Polis first. So Matt and Colby, like, how did you decide that, you know what, this is actually the problem we want to solve. We think we can solve it. We're going to go after this one.
Perfect. Yeah. So actually, like before Polis was even a thing, it was called something else. Me and Matt don't like to talk about it, but before Polis, we actually were going to be working with the city on Parks and Rec and also the CCDO. But after talks with them and I think it was about a year of working on it and talking with the city, we kind of pivoted at that point due to various factors, but we kind of honed in and focused in on mostly the navigation portion of our application. I guess we were fortunate enough that the problem came to us, I should say, to our class. So we didn't really have to go out there looking for much. So I guess we were lucky in that aspect. But we knew it was the right solution and it was a problem that we should find a solution for, because when we would talk about our ideas, and at first in this class, me and Matt, it was just like an instant thing, like, oh, like, how about this? Like, and we were bouncing ideas off each other. It kind of came full circle to the Bluetooth low energy beacons. and that we just wanted to be a navigation app and provide, increased enhanced navigation for people to get where they need to get to. And we kind of figured it was the right solution because every time we would talk about it, me and Matt, initially we were just tossing ideas around, but when we would toss it to other people outside of, our scope, you could see their eyes light up. You could kind of see they're interested in it, and they're like, well, and then it's always good when people start giving you suggestions when you initially just like give them your idea and they start talking like, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? So that's when me and Matt kind of like, okay, I think we can go somewhere with this if it's generating this much excitement and enthusiasm, especially in the San Antonio community. So from that point on, we've just been in contact with the right people. Joyce has been a great help, as well as the city, especially during these times, during the pandemic. The city has been a great help as well. So
yeah, it's always a good feeling when you're in the middle of pitching and somebody goes, and could it also do this? And it could also do that. Like that's
right.
That energy that you get off of people. Emma, I'm curious, what was it? How did you get to Pawtify? And did you have any of those moments where people were like, oh my God, and it should do this and it should do that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was going to add for us, like we kind of recognize the problem. I've had previous experience working at animal shelters, so I kind of like feel that pain a little bit from like a rescue shelter standpoint. And so the idea was, almost presented to us in a way when we were at Code Up and Joyce came to present the CivTech challenges. Like, Laura and I kind of both looked at each other in class and we were like, that's it. Like, that's the problem. And so throughout the 2 years before 2020, before we were officially inside the incubator program, I think Laura and I started to both realize that like, okay, this isn't just this one little idea that we can solve. Like this is really multifaceted. There's a lot that we can branch off. We can take this one solution and we can go in this direction or this direction. And so we saw like, not only can we solve, it was possible within our wheelhouse to solve this problem, but we can grow. And so we saw a lot of growth in the solution itself for us. And so I think that's, part of the reason we've kept going. And, this year we had Pawtify did have like a little bit of a pivot from a notification system to a more broad adoption application that we could build for adopters and for the shelters. So just being in that position and having to pivot, mid-program, we got to use those like multi-facets. So we got to say, hey, we're not stuck in a corner just because this one thing didn't work out. Like we have all of these other options and we just need to identify, the biggest problem and the solution that we need to go and continue to move forward. So it's definitely worked out for us. And we get that, people get excited about animals, I think in general. So when we pitch, people are like, yeah, like you should do this and this. And so, we're definitely, we enjoy pitching because we always come out of it. It's always a conversation versus a pitch in the end, I think.
That's awesome. So Polis, a little bit of a different story from Polis. Sounds like you had a personal connection to working in the animal shelter. And then Emily, I know with solovaGo, yours is kind of everyone sort of has a story that addresses kind of what solovaGo is built for. But I'm curious, how did you land on being the thing that you wanted to develop?
Right. So ours started pretty personally as well. It started discussing a problem over lunch. My teammate Jennifer and I were at lunch, and she was talking about how she had gone to meet some friends the previous weekend in an area she'd never been to. And she was like, yeah, I was kind of nervous. I didn't really know where to park. I didn't know if it was okay to walk this certain direction. And so it kind of started from that. And we were like, oh yeah, it'd be great if, we could have some information that would like kind of help us make some decisions about those areas. And then also help other people make those decisions by providing feedback. And so we've always known our problem. I think it's really the solution that's grown the most during this incubator process, like how we're solving for that. I mentioned before, like the data that would be useful to other users. At first, we were really focused on crime data, like reported crimes, and getting that mapped out and providing that data. And while we're still going down that road and think that data is incredibly useful, we also think that the feedback that people give about these areas is what's most useful, because you can't always necessarily like pinpoint an overall feeling of safety. Like you can't, you don't call a non-emergency number and say like, hey, it feels weird over here because the lights are out, And so that's some of the information that we feel like we're going to be able to gather from our users that will help other users.
Yeah, that's a really nice lead into what I want to ask next, which is, I think for your app in particular, you were very opinionated about who it was for and who it was going to serve. And we talked about that a lot with people who are at risk, people who are more likely to be victims of violent crime. I'm curious and I'll kind of throw this out to the group, but Emily, if you don't mind, what research did you do? I'm a huge fan of research. Like, what did before you started, or I guess the question is, did you do a ton of research? And if you did, how did you do it? Or if your first impression was, let's just go build something and test it, how did you make that decision? When do you know how to stop researching and start building?
Right. So while we were going through Code Up, the time frame on that, we basically just started building. But once we started nearing the incubator program, we started circulating a lot of surveys, and we're able to gather a lot of demographics on different people and, what attributes to someone's feeling of safety or unsafety in an area, if that makes sense. And so we kind of just started building off of that. But I mean, one of our biggest things that we're passionate about is inclusivity. And so, we definitely know who our target user will most likely be, but definitely not trying to say like, this is, just for this one person, and we've learned by like through our survey. We've also had some focus groups that have been really helpful. Just hearing different people's standpoints and their different feelings on why they don't feel safe in certain areas. Like it's really different for everyone. And so we're going to continue to listen and grow to our users and gather feedback. And so I don't, at a certain point you do have to stop researching and just start building. But I think that, I think it's going to continue to be a loop as we go.
Sounds like you did both at the same time too, kind of building a little, researching a little, keeping those balanced. Polis, I'm curious, Matt and Colby, I think you had less of a kind of a user story you were trying to solve and really more of a technology problem. What was your research process like? And when did you feel confident, hey, we're going to go with these particular, Bluetooth trackers?
Yeah, so it started right after class, basically. So that night, Colby and I went and started discussing, like, I think we can fix this like issue using technology. We realized like there should be a technology out there that is able to provide navigation when there isn't service. And so we did the next best thing besides going on the internet, and we walked into Geekdom. And we set up a meetings with about 3 different companies in Geekdom just to kind of figure out what to do. We didn't really know what to do. It was our first entrepreneurship class. And within the first meeting, we found out about Bluetooth beacons. We talked to Codal, and they gave us the idea, basically said like, yeah, you could use this technology, some technology I'd found on the internet. But he said, what you really want to use is Bluetooth beacons. And that's where we kind of decided that like that's the route we were going to go. And then it was a rabbit hole of trying to figure out how to set up Bluetooth beacons. Like, what are they capable of? Figuring out all the specs. I found the best article I found on Bluetooth beacons was actually from a Spanish university in collaboration with an Ecuadorian university, translated to English. And it had all the specs, how it works, what how everything. And it was great. Like, and so a lot of research went into the technology, but also into the business side of things. Like, how do you start a project with the city of San Antonio? Like, yes, we were talking with them, but really like going and driving in, like, how do you contract with the city? Is there a limit to what you can do under a contract? And we actually talked to this guy, Bo, from Kinetic Cloud, and he kind of explained all that. And that was all within 2 weeks of coming up with the idea that we were able to get this guidance and research basically from the Geekdom community, which was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's like once you choose it, that technology, the yak shaving starts, right? So like, we want to do these Bluetooth beacons. Okay, then you have to go research 5 or 6 different things that make that. Yeah, you can end up down a rabbit hole. Super cool though. Emma, I'm curious. I know, again, I'm curious to know how much research did you do? When did you start building? But I know in the course of your research, you guys kind of uncovered some stuff that made you had to do a pretty major pivot that you alluded to earlier. So I wonder if you could talk about that as well.
Yeah. So I think a lot of our research pre-incubator program was having a lot of discovery meetings with animal care services here in San Antonio. We got to look at their existing software. We got to hear firsthand from some of their staff members what the challenges actually were. So that was the bulk of our research pre-incubator. And then as we got into the incubator program and we started to, it was almost like we were coming up this hill, and we were just about to jump off into the, okay, let's develop it stage. And we did get some development done on it, but we were doing this research on their existing software. And so in order to do a notification system, we needed to have access to their current animal data, like their current inventory of what they had in the shelter. And so once we started to do that research and started to uncover a little bit more with the ACS, we learned that their contract had some specific rules and language around data usage for third parties. And so through that research is when we learned, okay, like, this might not be possible with ACS. It might not be possible in terms of the timeline for this incubator program, but we really wanted to, ACS has been with us, since we graduated Code Up. So we knew we really wanted to still utilize them as a partner within the program. And so Laura and I kind of sat down and we were like, okay, we have all of these different facets. So like, which direction do we go now? How can we still, partner with ACS because they have a clear need, a clear want to have some type of new technology to help them streamline their adoption process? How do we still go with that, have a solution for them, and still be able to offer that solution as a product or a service to the other shelters in San Antonio and beyond? And so that's when we started to do a little bit more research with them, and then a little bit more research with some of their other shelter contacts in San Antonio. So they helped us, have meetings and be able to send some surveys like solovaGo got to do, and learn a little bit more about adoption processes over different shelters in San Antonio. We surveyed adopters and what they were looking for in terms of what could a product do to help them in their search for a new pet. And so that's a lot of the research we did while we were pivoting, so that we could solidify kind of the new product or the new direction that we were going to go in.
Yeah, that resiliency is so important, right? Like, it breaks your heart when you're in the middle of like, oh, it's definitely all going to happen, and then it just super doesn't. But I think every startup has those things come along, and I'm curious to throw it to the rest of the group, either solovaGo or Polis. What surprised you in your journey? Like, what came along that you had not foreseen, and how did you react to that?
Yeah, I can answer that, and that one is pretty easy. For instance, in the incubator program, the main thing that kind of threw us off and threw most of the world off was the pandemic, and adapting to it and figuring out how to test the beacons and test the technology when everything shut down, when our technology is for people being out and about and nobody was out and about. What do you do? And yeah, that was a huge wrench thrown in everything for most everybody, but we're still here. We're still fighting. So yeah.
So what did that teach you, or how did you pivot? How did you react to that? Did you just keep going, or were you like, wow, we have to rethink our whole app for a pandemic world?
No. So we kind of threw around a few ideas of, should we pivot? Should we start to do like contact tracing or this, that, and the other? But in reality, the pandemic will end and people will get back out there. And if we're there for when people get back out there, that's a powerful timeline for the production of Polis. Now, during the lockdown, we threw around the idea of starting to put up beacons in my backyard and just kind of test the technology between my backyard, the alley, and my neighbor's backyard. We never got to the point of needing to do that since things started to open up and we were able to put up beacons inside Geekdom at least. But yeah, we were about to just start to throw up beacons in my backyard and start testing it there because there wasn't anything else to do.
And Emily, oh, go ahead, Colby. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, sorry, I was just gonna add something else onto that. Just as well, like we had to make some pivots as well, but we kind of sat down and kind of were like, do we have to completely change what features we want for our app, or can we just slightly change what we're doing to fit like the needs of COVID? And for one instance of that is we want ping notifications and advertisements for businesses to engage with the customers on the Riverwalk. You know, top of mind, that's like, oh, happy hour, specials, just stuff like that for restaurants to get that information out. But for COVID, it's like, well, if we're doing ping notifications, a big thing is how many people are in the restaurant. Stuff like that. Like maximum occupancy is a big thing, especially on the Riverwalk and in COVID time. So just changing, not necessarily pivoting a lot, but just changing this, like a feature here and there to kind of, you know, pivot towards and kind of pander to the pandemic a little bit.
Yeah, that's so cool that you didn't pivot away from your idea. You kind of found out your idea was a platform. It was a whole communications tool. So you could communicate advertising or opening and closing, how many people are in the restaurant. Like that opens up a whole avenue of development that you could go chase down. That's super cool. Emily, anything come along that surprised you besides the global pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, to kind of add on to what Matt and Colby were saying, you know, we're another application that's focused a lot around, oh, sorry, wrong side, the go, you know, it's it's all about getting out and doing things. And the past, oh goodness, what is it, like 8 months now, it's been all about stay. But one thing that we found as we were going through this, while we may have initially like thought that people would be using our application when they were, you know, maybe going out at night, right? Like going to bars, going to meet a friend for dinner, that sort of thing. We found that there's a lot of people during this that have still been venturing outside in new and different ways for them. Like there's a lot of people that are, you know, riding their bikes a lot more than they used to, taking advantage of like the gorgeous trails that we have here in San Antonio. And so we started, you know, thinking about those things and didn't end up needing to pivot as much as we thought we would, because people are still getting out. It's just a little bit different than it was before. But I mean, like Matt said, we hope that we'll come through this and we'll be here when we do. So.
Yeah, better days ahead. Yeah, that's super interesting. Like JobWord, the startup that I'm involved in, is entering its second year, and you know we had to change everything we were doing, right, to kind of react to the pandemic. There's always going to be something. I think in any technological endeavor, especially in startup land, like something is going to come along and disrupt everything. We just got like the tsunami of that thing this year, and it's been really awesome to watch each of you kind of react to that, have conversations about that. Adjust, find new avenues and new opportunities inside of that world, because you're going to have to keep doing that. Long after the pandemic has passed, there's going to be something else that comes along that you're going to have to change everything. That's really cool. I'm a big believer in surrounding yourself with people that you're proud of. I get to serve on a team with 3 of my favorite people in the whole world. And I think if you surround yourself with a team you're proud of, the work you do, you will be proud of, even if the mission is little. So I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to just talk about your teams, who's on your team, how did you structure your team, how did you know you had the right team? And I want to extend that definition to mentors and stakeholders. I know you have people you work with at COSA, people you work with at Geekdom. Who are the people you surrounded yourself with to be successful? And I'll toss that out to the group.
I'll go ahead and I'll answer that. I'll talk about Laura first. Laura's my co-founder, and we met at CodeUp, and it was kind of one of those people you meet in your life, and you were just like, okay, I think we're going to be friends for a while. Like, you know, not knowing that we were going to start like a company together or anything. I was just like, you know, you're fun to go get a drink with. And I think over the last, you know, couple of years before the incubator started, Laura and I, you know, we were just like, we make a really good team. Like, you know, Laura has strengths where I have weaknesses, and vice versa. And, you know, Laura and I in Pawtify, or, you know, in other aspects of life, have like just kind of like been through a lot together and grown a lot together. And then especially with, you know, the incubator this year and the pivot, and, you know, Laura and I just kind of like looking at each other for, you know, what do we do next? Like, I'm scared, I'm nervous, I'm overwhelmed, you know, and just kind of like, you know, having her alongside me has just been incredible and phenomenal. It's made this experience so much better. I don't think that I could have gotten this far, or Pawtify would have been this far, without the teamwork that we have together. And you know, and I think Laura and I just kind of try to like emulate that within people that we ask for mentorship, or people who we, you know, decide to bring into Pawtify. We reached out to a few people for development help, and And that was awesome. And we've had a great time. We've had a really fun time working with, other people who are doing some contract development work with us. And Laura and I usually look forward to meeting with mentors and stuff because we know we're going to have like a good time, a good conversation, and it's going to be really helpful. And so we think that Laura and I make a really good internal team. And so with that, we're able to build a bigger team, a bigger network for us has some of those same aspects and same qualities too.
Yeah, Laura's awesome. Polis or solovaGo, either one of you?
Yeah, so for us, it's interesting. When Colby and I back in 2018 came up with the idea, we're working on it, but Colby, though he is a computer science major, does not know how to code a mobile application. And so that was a trouble that we had right at the beginning. It's like, we have this idea, we got business, we got computer science, but we need that development piece. And so we just didn't have it. So it kind of like the project kind of slowly started to fade away. And then while I was working at Geekdom, Andre came by to my desk, and Andre Gomes, he's our software developer, and Joyce had introduced him or mentioned me to him saying, hey, they're working on this project. Turns out Andre was working on the exact same idea, but in Boston. So he came over from DFA, was working on the exact same idea in Boston for Bluetooth beacons. And so that's how we met Andre, was in this inclusive environment, this collaborative environment of Geekdom. And then from there, like I realized the power that the community had in order to build something. So that's like tons of mentors, did multiple like mentor weeks with Dirk Elmendorf, just kind of talk through ideas. And then Nick Longo, I've talked with him through ideas, and just these tons of mentors and people, and surrounding myself in the community. You learn a lot. Like before 2 years ago, I didn't know much about technology. I knew how to use it. I could scroll through Facebook really well, but I didn't know what an API or an SDK were. And so like being able to understand that and learn was really helpful. And like just the team that we have is pretty great in my opinion, and what we've learned so far through the program and just being in the community has really like been great.
That's awesome. Emily, anyone from your team you want to shout out?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier on that the idea started over a lunch conversation. Jen had invited me to lunch that day because she immediately, early on in Code Up, was like, I want to work with you on my capstone. And so the two of us like had that conversation that day. And so for all potential future Code Up students, they don't always let you pick your teams. You can suggest who you want to work with, but it doesn't always work out that way. It helps if you have an idea. I'm pretty sure that Emma and Laura were in the same situation going into their capstone. But we knew we had the idea. And when we were trying to think of who our third person would be, Wayne had been someone that both of us had worked with really well. And so we requested that he be on our team, and we got really lucky. And so yeah, we all bring a lot of different things to the table. I think that the three of us are pretty different personality wise. I think that is something that helps us keep going. And communication has been the most important thing, especially during a global pandemic. Like if you don't have things set up, or if you're not talking frequently, it's really easy to just let a couple days go by and you're like, oh wait, what? Like we need to be doing stuff. So I think that's been something that's been really important for our team dynamic. And then as far as like the mentors go, there's such an amazing community here. And the mentors that we've worked with that have, because you don't want to just hear like, oh, it's great, good job. Like the ones that ask the questions and get us thinking. And I mean, that's been the most helpful thing through this process. And just knowing that we can always find the people to help us like fill in those gaps. I mean, we were learning new technologies as we were developing this. And all three of us, come into this with like the technical experience. And so the business side of things has been something that's been completely new to us. And so we've sought out a lot of advice and help on that.
So that's a good lead in. I want to follow up on that. you mentioned that like soft skills, right? Social skills, communication was suddenly super important. Of all the skills, of all the technical things you had to learn along the way, Emily, what surprised you the most? I don't know if this is your first startup or not, but you have to kind of be a salesperson. You kind of have to be a business person. You have to be a developer. You have to be a researcher. Like, which of those skills kind of surprised you the most that you had to learn?
Yeah, it's a lot of hats you have to wear. And so, because it's especially with the teams this small at this point, yeah, I've had to learn so much. I mean, like new, like completely new technologies. We also, so one of our teammates is actually in the National Guard, and so this has obviously been a big year for him to be activated. And so we've all had times where we've kind of just had to pick up things that initially going into this we weren't expecting to have to be responsible for or learn. Yeah, I'm like trying to.
No, that's a great answer. Like, I think your point about communication was really cool too. Like, you know, we all suddenly had to get really good at this, and staying accountable and staying on top of stuff. Already hard in a startup, doubly so hard this year. And you brought up some other stuff that I'd like to throw out to the rest of the group, which is, I forgive me, but I think for none of you is your startup your full-time job, correct? Right. Oh, it is for Matt. Okay. So, oh, no. Okay, cool. So I'm curious, there is always an excuse to not do a startup. There's always an excuse to not go build things. You have to juggle your time between your startup and your, adult job. How do you do that? How did you do that? What struggles did you encounter? And Matt, I'll throw it to you first.
Yeah. So starting when the incubator program, actually no, building up to the incubator program, I was working at Geekdom. So it was a great like little balance there that I had, because I could go from work and walk around the corner and sit down and work on Polis. But starting my new job recently during the incubator program at ScaleWorks, I mean, it's a balance for sure. There's a lot of stuff that needs to get done for Polis that you can't like always do, which is hard sometimes. Like deadlines get missed and it feels gut-wrenching, but like you just have to put in the hours and make sure that like you're there and you're at the meetings and you're listening and you're not tired from work. And if you are tired from work, like a full day's work, to go into a 3-hour meeting, that sometimes you got to drink a Red Bull at 5 o'clock. Like it happens, and you'll be up till 2, but you were alert in the meeting that at the time that it mattered. So yeah, being able to just have that balance of like just life, and it's kind of difficult when you're working 2 jobs almost, but yeah,
it stops being work-life balance and it starts being work balance. Like which work are you going to put ahead of the other work? Totally. Emily, Colby, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's definitely like, Laura and I have had to like really like focus on our schedules, our communication. Laura works in healthcare, so this year has been particularly hard on her work schedule, and so I'm so sorry, I have a cat and a dog in here right now.
It will surprise nobody that the people at Pawtify are animal people.
Yeah. And so it was that teamwork aspect too as well. So when I'm tired and I'm just like, hey, like at work I'm having to crank out like a new product and I'm exhausted and I like I just don't have the mental capacity, Laura would be like, I got you, like let me take notes during this meeting, like I can Laura, I could unload some of that onto Laura and vice versa when we needed to. And so that's kind of been really nice to have a partner to do that with, as we both try to do this part-time.
Yeah, a lot of this year is we've all kind of like, our work-life thing is gone, right? Like your dog runs into the room or you got to go take care of your kids or something. And it's cool to have a partner that's got your back and kind of I think we've all gotten better at that this year, of just sort of accepting that life gets in the way. So I don't know, maybe a silver lining for 2020. Emily, Colby, work balance. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, the most important thing is you just have to make time. I mean, that's the thing, because it's not just going to happen. You're not going to get to, 5 p.m. and just be like, you know what? I'm going to just like power through this, you know, like it's really having to set that time aside to do it, is what I found is the only way to stay motivated and stay productive. But I'll say for me, like it's things like this, some other programs that I participated in through like CivTech. They did a wonderful series about 2 months ago about equity in data. That was amazing. And it's the things like that that like really get you like geared up again and remind you like, oh yeah, this is really exciting, this thing that I'm doing. Because it's really easy to sit in your office, for a lot of us, our home office, for a lot of hours every day and, you know, just get exhausted. I'm not gonna lie, it gets exhausting at times. And so it's great to get to do things like this and the check-ins that we have with the other teams and just kind of being able to share the experience. Like it helps a lot to be going through this with other teams.
Yeah, and to kind of go off that for myself, just personally, yeah, I've been working from home like majority of the time. Thankfully, I was able to, but you know, I'm sitting at the same desk or chair for the whole day. So just trying to find that balance of just getting out, like just, and especially for me, from, you know, growing up and playing sports my whole life and being active, and then now quarantine's got me not active at all. But yeah, just trying to find that time and get that separation between, you know, work and work. And just have some time for yourself, is I think would probably be some good advice, especially during this time. But I mean, yeah, today you just kind of have to make sacrifices, even if you know, it's been a long day. I mean, I had a meeting from 4 to 5. I have this from 5 to 5:50, and then after this we have our monthly incubator meeting, and then me and Matt are actually meeting after that, so we can get our branding and stuff done. So I mean, like there's just days like today where they just have to happen and stuff has to get done. And you just gotta, you know, you have to suck it up and make time for it and get it done.
Yeah, the hustle is real. So getting a little bit back to your businesses specifically, each of you has a relationship to city stakeholders, which is kind of an added layer of complexity and added stakeholder consideration that all of you have to worry about that a lot of startups don't. And so I'm curious, what was the relationship like with the city? What was beneficial from that? How did you manage those expectations? And what maybe did you learn about interacting with local government like that in a startup?
Yeah, so for us, like the two city departments we really are working with is CCDO and OHP. Basically, OHP gives us approval to put beacons on the Riverwalk so we're not ruining the historical presence of the Riverwalk, and CCDO kind of like organizes it for us. And like working through this program, first of all, the experience has been great. This is one of my first experience working really with the city like so closely. And but sometimes you have to understand city priorities. For instance, like you're not always going to get an email back the same day or same week on something. Like the city has priorities and we're not number one. And like it's like when the pandemic hit, it was very evident that like they had stuff to do, and like we can't stop because of it though. And so like that was one of the big things I learned with working in the city, is that you can't, like, you have to work alongside them, not wait to work with them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And we should say CCDO is Center City Development Office, and OHP, I think you mentioned also, is Office of
Historical Preservation.
For those not in the know. Emma and Emily, anything that you learned in working with the city?
Yeah, no, I think a lot of what Matt said is very true, and Laura and I had the same experience. And the good thing about my job as well is like I'm working from home, and you know, my team is very much aware that this is also a side project that I'm very passionate about. So when I say like, hey, like this is the only time that the city could meet with me this week, I need to step out for an hour and meet with them, like, you know, I was very grateful to my team at my, you know, full-time job that I got that flexibility and stuff, because sometimes it's like the city's like, I have like, you know, 30 minutes between now and my next meeting to like answer some of your questions, and I'm like, okay, great, but like that, if that's your time, that's your time. And so, you know, you kind of just have to move along at their pace. And so, but we've had a great experience working with Chase Fossey at Animal Care Services. He has been such a tremendous help during the program and all through our pivot. He was very available. He opened a schedule for us, and so it's been a really good experience working with him and ACS as well as a whole.
That's awesome. Emily, I know you had some stuff come up with crime data and sharing that, getting that, integrating that. What was that like?
Yeah, so we've been working primarily with the SAPD. I remember going into one of those first meetings and being like a little bit nervous. But I've just been so amazed by all of our everyone that we've worked with in the city and just how much they're trying to like help steer us in the right direction. They're excited about what we're working on. They want to help. I think that the city of San Antonio as a whole is always excited to see innovation happening. That's been my experience. And so one thing that we found out that we had no idea about, we were steered there by one of our relationships at the SAPD, was that you need to be certified to view certain data. And so we were pointed down that path to get CJIS certified so that we could handle crime data. And I mean, that's something that we would not have known without these relationships and those conversations. But yeah, every quarterly check-in that we have with the city, we get such incredible feedback from them and from their stake in this. And it's very cool to be a part of this. And I'm excited to see what else comes out of it in the future.
Yeah, you mentioned working with SAPD, and in addition to the pandemic, we also saw a ton of activity this year in civil demonstrations against police violence. And I know your app, you've always been very explicit that it is for people vulnerable to violence, and that includes BIPOC. How did the events of this year, did you have to react to that? How did you react to it? How did it change the conversations you were having, either internally as a team or with SAPD?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we talked about at one of our check-ins with the city. I mean, there's always going to be some level of bias in data, unfortunately. And so that's been something that we've really been trying to educate ourselves on. I mentioned the series that we attended through CivTech in the city of San Antonio. Yeah, it's something that we're definitely trying to be cautious of because, police data, like there is going to be some level of bias there. That was something that was mentioned to us by Craig from the city. And so that's where we've really started to pivot more on the usefulness of like the user data, which not that users won't have biases as well, right? But it's something that we continue to try to consider like as we're building this and what we can do to handle the data we get and just make it the most useful information for our users and for the city. Yeah, it's super interesting, right? Like, where does the data come from? Is it good data? Is it skewed? That's a really interesting problems and a whole other dimension that you guys had to think about that I would guess the other teams didn't have to quite think about as much. So I wish all of you all the luck in the world. I hope your startups go on to be the most successful things in the world. But if you had to leave tomorrow, what would you say is the biggest lesson you've learned? What would you take with you to your next startup? Oh, we all got to think about that one. That was a big question. Emma, I'm going to make you go first just to put somebody on the spot.
No, that's fine. I think definitely one of the biggest lessons I have learned throughout this process, pre-incubator and during the incubator, is flexibility. And so like Laura and I have just kind of like been like, wow, this is not a linear path. As much as I and my personality type like wants it to be this like, let's check this list off and get these things done and like finish at the finish line. Definitely like taking flexibility as like my biggest lesson learned. Like the path is not linear. The finish line never looks the same from one month to another. And so yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things that Laura and I have gotten.
I have the tremendous honor to get to work with Dirk Elmendorf at our startup job board, and he calls that experience the tunnel of schizophrenia. That once you start to build something, you will suddenly you'll either want to or have to build about 10 other things. And if you build those, you'll have to build 10 other things. And yes, the tunnel of schizophrenia. Matt, Colby, lessons learned at Polis?
Yeah. So one thing that I learned the most out of this incubator program is that you can plan a lot, you can research a lot, you can formulate ideas, but ideas don't become a startup unless you take action and start to push the ball so that it starts to roll. And that's the one thing that we learned is like, you can prep all you want, but if you're not out there, boots on the ground, doing stuff, it's not going to happen. And so you just have to get up there and do it. You got to get up and do it. Don't just think about it, you know?
For me, I mean, not to sound cliche, but communication is definitely key. And that's something we found out after that. I think that's something we all kind of found out after that first quarter, that, you know, this is kind of tough. And if you're not talking with your team about every situation and including them in everything and making sure they're in the loop, then things get lost. You know, things don't get done. As we saw in Q1, but since then, you know, fixing that issue and heading forward. I mean, Q2 and Q3, we've been rocking and rolling, and we're looking forward to a great Q4 as it's looking. So, yeah, just communication.
I would say take it one day at a time. I mean, you look at sometimes like I'll look at like everything that needs to be done, right? And it just feels completely overwhelming, but you just have to start, right? Like Matt said, you just have to start one day at a time, you know? There's that saying about like eating an elephant, you know, you eat it one bite at a time. Like it feels like that sometimes. And ask for help. I'm saying this to myself too, ask for help, like continue to ask for help, because you don't know everything. Like no one knows everything. And that's why we have the community, you know, that's why we have each other. And so, yeah, that'd be my advice.
That's awesome. I know we're starting to get close to time here, but I do want to give you an opportunity to talk about what's next for each of your startups. Tell people where they might be able to learn a little bit more about you. And if there's anything you need, if anything you're looking for, kind of use this as a forum to tell people what's next and how they can help you. Polis, you want to go first?
Oh, yeah. I wasn't sure if Colby was going to take it. Yeah, so what's next and what we're looking for is hopefully we'll start beta testing. We'll be looking for beta testers on the Riverwalk and inside Geekdom. So we'll be pushing that on social media pretty soon, just trying to activate on that, figuring out the bugs so that when the time comes, we have a polished product or a nice thin vertical slice that we can push out and hopefully gain some traction.
Love it. Emily, what's next for solovaGo?
Yeah, so I was going to drop our website in the chat. It's solovaGo.com. We are Go with solovaGo on all of our social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And we too are going to be looking for beta testers very soon. There's a spot at the bottom of our website that you can sign up for email updates, that sort of thing, get engaged. And then you can also email us directly at hello@solovago.com.
Cool. Emma, what's next? Where can people find you?
Yeah, no. So our handle on all of our social medias is Pawtify SA. And so we're pretty active on that. If you have any questions or like want to reach out, if you have knowledge about the animal industry or the animal shelter industry, please reach out to us. We love to meet people who are in the industry, gather some more knowledge, gather what different types of shelters are doing for their adoption process. We love talking to people in the industry, or if you're a potential adopter, or if you have adopted a lot of animals and have a lot of knowledge from an adopter's side, we would love to speak with you about your experiences that you've had in San Antonio. Laura and I are currently working on our thin vertical slice, so we're hoping that we get to have our call for beta testers sometime in the next quarter. So we're really excited about that. Really excited to demo that thin vertical slice here in the next few weeks at our quarterly presentation. And so yeah, that's feel free to reach out to us on any kind of social media. We'd love to hear from you guys.
Cool. And then Polis and solovaGo dropped their URLs over in chat. Polis.network for Polis and solovaGo.com for solovaGo. We have about 4 minutes left, but I think we're wrapping up. So with that, I will kick it back to Leslie. Thank you all for taking the time to meet tonight. Thank you for sharing part of your story. I think you're 3 tech companies that San Antonio can be really, really proud of. Glad you're in San Antonio. Glad you're part of the tech community. Really, really proud of the work you guys are doing. So thank you so much for your time tonight, and thanks for sharing part of your story.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Drew. It was so fun having you in, talking to the teams, especially because you've worked closely with all of them. You have so much knowledge about what they're doing. Thank you to all the teams for hopping on and giving an hour outside of all your schedules while you're building your company and you're working and you're doing all the things. It's so great to share what you're doing with our community and get them hopefully inspired and excited as well. Sharing your journey as young entrepreneurs with really early stage companies. I mean, y'all are in the thick of it, so it's always good to hear from people like you. And for those who are interested in learning more about the incubator program, just geekdom.com/incubator. We actually have open applications right now for the next cohort for 2021 that will kick off in January. So if you're interested in being part of the program, please go look at the application. Please learn more about the program, check it out. We want you to apply. There's about 2 more weeks left to apply, so please apply. Also, keep an eye out for February-ish time. In February, we're going to have a really awesome demo day with this cohort. So you'll get to kind of really dive into their product, see what the end result of their incubator program, everything that they've accomplished, and get to learn more about them again a few months later, right? So it's going to be exciting. Also, as the CivTech host, if you are interested in more civic entrepreneurship opportunities, check out civtech-sa.com. You can learn more about the CivTech program. We're always here at Geekdom. We're always here at CivTech to plug you into civic innovation, civic entrepreneurship things, and all things in the Geekdom community. As everyone here, I think, touched on tonight, it's about this community, leaning on each other, learning from each other, working together. So thank you again for everyone who is here, everyone tuning in, everyone watching later, and we hope you have a great rest of your San Antonio Startup Week.